بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. We finished speaking on al-inqita', a break in the chain of narration and its different types. And the author, the Matin, Hafidh rahimahullah ta'ala, saying that the break in the chain could be clear and obvious, or it could be unclear and subtle, it could be hidden. And the first is discovered by history, or through history, through the dates of a person dying, a person being born, a person seeking knowledge, a person traveling. During this year, this narrator wasn't in this country. He died before he got to that country, etc. We explained that. He then says, وَالثَّانِي الْمُدَلَّسِ وَيَرِدُ بِصِيغَةٍ تَحْتَمِنُ اللُّقَاءَ كَعَنْ وَقَالَ. And the second is that which is called mudallis. Mudallis, something that we took and we studied in al-Bayquniyah and also al-Tadhkirah. Al-mudallis. And the mudallis hadith, with the fatha and with the kasra, mudallis, it is the hadith that is brought via a chain of narration in which there is a break in the chain. Speaking here based off of the metin, because just because a person is a mudallis doesn't mean that he actually made tadlis in this isnad. Just because he says an doesn't mean that it's tadlis. But that's for a further level expertise of study. What's important is sticking to the script. He says the second type of break in the chain, which is considered to be hidden, is the mudallas. And the mudallas hadith is mentioned in a way in which it's possible for narrator A to have met narrator B. It's possible. It's possible. It's not decisive, but it definitely doesn't negate it. Such as an or qala. Just like we study in the Bayquniyah and we study in the Tadhkirah. In Arabic, the person would say, An Abdullah ibn Abdurrahman. Qala Abdullah ibn Abdurrahman. And he wouldn't say, Haddathana or Haddathani or Akhbarana or Akhbarani, Anba'ani Abdullah ibn Abdurrahman. Abdullah ibn Abdurrahman reported to me. Abdullah ibn Abdurrahman told me. Abdullah ibn Abdurrahman told us. Abdullah ibn Abdurrahman related to us. No. Rather, he would say an, which would be equivalent in English to Abdullah ibn Abdurrahman, from Abdullah ibn Abdurrahman, or Abdullah ibn Abdurrahman said. But he doesn't say he said to me, i.e., the author is saying that there's a break between A and B. Between me and Abdullah ibn Abdurrahman, there's someone else. But when I mention the isnad, I report directly from Abdullah ibn Abdurrahman. I didn't hear from him. I didn't hear anything from this report from Abdullah ibn Abdurrahman. But I don't say that someone else told me, Fulan told me from Abdullah ibn Abdurrahman. There's a hidden, missing link between me and him, but I mention it in a way which is vague. As we have previously explained, the meaning of a tadlis and who is a mudallis and what is a mudallas hadith. We explained this in our the previous books in which we covered, and we said that the word tadlis, the scholars of Islam, they say it linguistically means several things. From them, they say ikhfa'u aib as-sil'ah. They say is if you had a product, a piece of merchandise, something that you're selling, you hide its defects, its blemishes. Something's wrong with it, you keep it from the one who passes by in the marketplace. They also say ikhtilat al-dhalam bin-nur. They say it's darkness and lightness mixed, like daybreak, the falaq, fajr time. The sun is rising, it's not 100% bright, nor is it 100% dark. So the horizon is mixed, is peppered with light and with darkness. That's what it linguistically means, okay? Basically meaning al-khafa. Al-khafa, something is hidden, is vague. It's not 100% this, nor 100% that. So the product is put or held up in such a way in which you can't see the messed up part of it. But when you buy it, you take it home, you bring it back to return, it says, well, that's your fault for not checking. I didn't cover it up. It was sitting in the window, you picked it up and you bought it. Or hakadha. As far as in the sciences of hadith, then what he's talking about right here is the type of tadlis which is called tadlisul isnad. Tadlisu al-isnad, as we previously explained, is when a narrator reports from a sheikh that he actually studied with. He heard from the sheikh. But this specific hadith, he didn't hear from that sheikh. This specific report, he didn't hear from that sheikh. Rather, he heard it from a second person. So instead of mentioning that second person, he narrates directly from his normal sheikh, but he doesn't say, haddathani, he reported to me. It's not frank, because if he said that, he would be a liar. Instead, he quote-unquote cheats by saying, Sheikh Fulan said. Who did he say it to, me or another student? Khayran, inshallah. We previously explained that in the ruling of at-tadlis. Moving forward, he then says, وَكَذَا الْمُرْسَلُ الْخَفِي مِنْ مُعَاصِرٍ لَمْ يَلْقَى. He says, and the same applies to another type of hadith or issue pertaining to the isnad, and that is called al-mursal al-khafi. Al-mursal al-khafi, which can be translated to mean the hidden mursal. This is a bit different now, whereas when we are explaining mursal, we said it is the narration that the tabi attributes to the Prophet ﷺ, or the happening, the event, the story, the sabab nuzul, the battle. This verse was sent down during the time of prophecy and is reported by a tabi'i. But the word mursal, linguistically and technically, has a broader meaning than that. The word mursal, according to the early scholars of hadith, is mutlaq al-inqita'. It is the sheer break of the chain. Anything that's missing. A narrator didn't hear from this one, they say it's mursal. This one narrates from this companion, this one narrates from this tabi'i, this one narrates from this sheikh, and he didn't hear from him, he didn't meet him. It's mursal. Even if they live during the same time. If they live during the same time. So, the author, he says that it is a mu'asir, a contemporary. He lived with someone. They were of the same era, i.e., they should have met. They should have met. But he never met this person. And not only did he didn't meet him, but he narrates from him. But the reason why it's called khafi, it's hidden, is because it isn't an issue of date or the dates. There isn't an issue of one's death, like we said before. Rather, this person was alive when that person was alive. This sheikh was well and healthy, teaching people when this student was seeking ilm. He went to his country, he went to his city. But for one reason or another, when he went to the sheikh's masjid, the sheikh wasn't there. He was sick that day. He traveled that day. Okay? Sheikh Fulan from Jordan, he came to Medina. But I never met him there because when I was going to his house, the sheikh had an emergency. So I'm in the same city as him, the same time period as him. He's a teacher of hadith. I'm a student of hadith, but I didn't meet him. So this is a hidden type of breakage in the chain. It's a hidden type of breakage in the chain. طيب, khairan inshallah. Let's move forward. Let's not get stuck right there. He then says, after he's finished discussing the types of break of the chain or breakage in the chain, the inqita' and its different types, the mu'adal, munqati', mu'allaq, mursal, etc. He now speaks on the second reason behind a hadith being rejected. The second reason, the second main category or reason behind a hadith being rejected. And that is what we previously mentioned, at-tan. At-tan. He says, ثُمَّ الطَّعْنِ إِمَّا أَن يَكُونَ لِكَذِبِ الرَّاوِي. He says, as far as the ta'an, an attack that's levied against the narrator of hadith, then this attack has to be for one of the following reasons. Number one, لِكَذِبِ الرَّاوِي, is because the narrator is a liar. He's an actual liar. أَوْ تُهْمَتِهِ بِذَلِكَ, or we don't necessarily say he's a liar, but he's been accused of being a liar. He's been accused. Or he lies when it comes to speaking about the people. He doesn't lie about hadith, but he's a liar when it comes to the normal day-to-day society. He then says, أَوْ فُحْشِ غَلَطِهِ, or the narrator is extremely poor. Not he has a bad memory, a poor memory, extremely poor memory. And he makes mistakes very, very, very often. أَوْ غَفْلَتِهِ, he says, or because of his heedlessness. He's heedless, empty-minded. أَوْ فِسْقِهِ, or because he's a fasiq, he's a sinner. He's someone who's very sinful. He does acts of sin in public in front of the people. أَوْ وَهْمِهِ, مَضْبُوط أَوْ وَهْمِهِ, it says here, or because he misinterprets. He thinks something that he heard or memorized, in actuality, that isn't the case. Instead of him just forgetting, but he actually says something else which is incorrect. أَوْ مُخَالَفَتِهِ, or the ta'an is levied against the narrator because he opposes other narrators, i.e. not once or twice, but he constantly does it. Something's wrong, or he's constantly going against a strong, large number and group of narrators. Something isn't right. أَوْ جَهَالَتِهِ, or because he's unknown. He's unknown. We don't know who he is. If he's unknown, of course, we don't know whether he's a liar, trustworthy, strong, weak. We don't know. أَوْ بِدْعَتِهِ, or because of his bid'ah, that he's either practicing or he's made up himself, and or he's calling to and inviting people to and showing love and allegiance upon that bid'ah. All of those different reasons, whether he's the head or whether he's the tail of the sect. And the further or the detailed discussion, inshallah ta'ala, will come regarding that. He says, أَوْ سُوءِ حِفْظِهِ, or because his memory is poor. His memory is poor, meaning he just doesn't remember. Not that he goes against someone else, not that he misinterprets or misnarrates, but he just can't remember it. You ask him a question, what did you hear last night? He says, I don't know, I can't remember. It slipped my mind, it's on the tip of my tongue. So Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentions these reasons behind an attack being levied against a narrator, behind the narrator being criticized, and furthermore, the hadith being declared weak and rejected. So please pay close attention to this. He says, first and foremost, he says it has to be لِكَذِبِ الرَّاوِي, because of the narrator being a liar. A narrator being a liar. And there are different ways that the ulama of Islam have discovered that someone is a narrator of lies. Sometimes they'll catch him in a lie. Sometimes they'll look at the hadith that he reports and no one else reports them, and the hadith is a clear lie. Or sometimes it will be he'll actually acknowledge the fact that he's a liar. He'll make tawbah from it and then declare later on that I used to be a liar. Okay, there are many ways behind the ulama of Islam discovering and figuring out that the Prophet, the Prophet ﷺ has been lied upon by this narrator, a fabricator. Number two, he says, أَوْ تُهْمَتِهِ بِذَلِكَ, a person being accused of being a liar. Whether it means he's accused of being a fabricator in hadith, he reports a hadith which clearly goes against the principles of the deen, clear, sound, common sense, historical facts, i.e. he reports a hadith which is clearly fabricated. But he isn't known to be a fabricator. And he's the only one who narrated the hadith. We can't find a hadith from any other narrator, from any other person. And we say this person as if he's a liar, as if he's a fabricator of hadith. And some ulama, they explain this to mean tuhma bil-kadhib, when a person lies among people. He's a liar among his family, his friends, his neighbors, his social gatherings in which he sits. He's a liar. Moving forward, he says, "Oh fuhshi ghalatihi, ay kathratihi." A person just making too many mistakes all the time. His memory isn't that bad. He's not a liar. He's not accused of being a liar, but he just has too many monstrous errors. Khairan, inshallah. We also mentioned about his ghafla, being heedless, falling asleep in class, taking a narration from anyone, allowing someone to feed him a narration, not verifying it, not keeping his notes safe, just absent-minded. He says, "O fisqihi," or a person making a sin, a statement or an action, which is from the kaba'ir, the major sins, or for him to continuously fall into minor sins and not stop, and not make any tawbah, and not leave it alone and do it in public, and to scorn them and look down upon them. So this goes to show us that a person who wishes to be a sound narrator of a hadith, he has to be free from bid'ah and free from sin. Not like the people today who take bits and pieces of the sciences of hadith and apply it to the sciences or the rules of criticizing and refuting someone. And they talk day and night about a person being an innovator, a person has mistakes, a person, he went against this, he went against this scholar, and so on and so forth. And they themselves are known sinners. Known sinners. It isn't hidden. It's well known. Or at least they're people who are constantly being accused of being sinners. Okay, the first time the sister lied on you. Tayyib. The second time it actually wasn't you, but somehow it got confused and it got attributed to you. But the third time, the fourth time, for a span of 20 years, 15 years, 10 years, and it continually accuse you of doing these type of sick acts and these sins, something's wrong now. Something is clearly wrong. This scandal, this incident, this is on social media. This one is reporting it. This sister is reporting it. This brother said you stole money. This masjid kicked you out. This organization said that you're a thief. Something's clearly wrong now. Something is clearly wrong. So just like a narration can be rejected because the reporter is an innovator, a narration can be rejected because you're a sinner. And Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah, they were harsh on sins and they were harsh on bid'ah. Because bid'ah is a sin as well. It's mukhalafa, it's against the sharia. So that's another discussion today with regards to the modern people and how they disrespect the great science of hadith by taking bits and pieces and leaving off whole portions. And then those bits and the pieces that they take, they mix and they confuse and they jumble. And they take the interpretation of this sheikh and of this scholar over the interpretation and the practice of the ulama of the past. But that's another discussion. And the only reason why we're mentioning it is because it's dangerous and it's become widespread. And unfortunately, it's become a means of the da'wah of the sunnah to be slowed down. And oftentimes to be halted. وَلَا حَوْلَ وَلَا قُوَّةَ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ. Moving forward, he then says, wahmihi, we explained that. Mukhalafati, we explained all of that. Khair, inshallah. The author, he says, فَالْأَوَّلُ الْمَوْضُوعُ. He says, as far as the first, yani the type of hadith or the name and the title that's given to the hadith reported by the first type of narrator who was attacked. Yani, he says, the ta'an, the attack on a narrator. So, if the narrator is considered to have kadhib, then his hadith, Al-Hafidh ibn Hajar, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says it's called mawdu'. It's called mawdu'. Just like we took in Al-Tadhkirah and Al-Bayquniyah as well. No difference. طيب, now, As far as the details of al-mawdu', then there are many details. Rather, in the college of hadith, that's a separate field of study. In the college of hadith, that's a separate field of study. We have a class which is called al-wad'u wal-wadda'un. A class just on fabricated hadiths and fabricators, or fabricators and fabricated hadith. Just on that. So, a few basic ground points or ground rules. First and foremost, the hadith mawdu', as we took in a tadhkirah, is sharr al-da'if. It's the worst type of weak hadith. And as we also explained in a tadhkirah, it isn't something we can attribute to the Prophet ﷺ. And there are different reasons behind hadith being fabricated. Sometimes it's done intentionally, and oftentimes it's done unintentionally. As far as a hadith which is fabricated, done by someone unintentionally, then that's someone who has an extremely poor memory, extremely heedless, or a person has a bad scribe. Some of the scholars of hadith, such as, for example, مثلا, let's say, Qais ibn al-Rabi' is narrated and is reported that he had an evil son. His son would take things and write things and feed him things that weren't from his narrations. Or as the ulama of Islam say, for example, Sufyan ibn Waki', the son of the great Waki' ibn al-Jarrah, they would say, Ubtudiya bi waraqi su'in. He was afflicted with an evil scribe, someone who would write down for him that was a liar himself. And he would throw him narrations and put things in his notes and play around with him because he was so heedless. I mean, of the ulama of Islam, they say, listen, we'll help you fix your hadiths, but you have to get rid of the scribe. And he refused to. And they say they didn't take the advice and he was abandoned. So these are a few examples of someone who can unintentionally make hadiths which are fabricated or narrate them. As far as the intentional fabrication in the science of hadith, then that's a long, rich history behind that, such as the ascetics, the zuhad, people of zuhd, or people of Sufiya, or such as the mutasibin, the fanatics for madhabs. They will make up hadith for Malik, make up hadith for Abu Hanifa, or such as those who hated a race or color or a nation or people. They made up hadiths about Persians. Persians made up hadiths disparaging the Arabs. They made up hadiths about Africans. They made up hadiths about different tribes, different clans, different families. Okay, they made up hadiths about companions, Muawiyah. They fabricated hadiths against him, or fabricated hadiths against Ali, or fabricated hadiths for Ali, or fabricated hadiths for Muawiyah. Wahakadha. Okay, or for certain leaders, or for some people would just do it just for fame and just for money, just to get money. Okay, just to get recognition, and there are many other reasons as well. The scholars of hadith, as we explained in many classes, they lay down meticulous principles to protect the Prophet ﷺ's Sunnah from this evil monster, the evil monster of fabrication. Not like the Orientalists or the ignoramuses from among the Muslims, the madhabis, and the people like this say that the Sunnah is just full of da'if, weak, fabricated hadiths. There's no way of discovering what's right and what's wrong, what's sound and what isn't, what's authentic, what isn't, so just leave all of it alone. It's all fabricated. Alright, rather the person who says this, he doesn't realize it, that he's actually affirming the position of his opponent and defeating himself. Because for you to say that there are weak hadiths and fabricated hadiths, that proves that it sticks out. It sticks out. If a person says there are dandelions in the garden, There are tulips in the garden, a lot of tulips in the garden. That clearly proves that the entire garden isn't what? Isn't composed of dandelions. Every flower in the garden isn't a tulip, because you're pointing them out and you're counting them. Are there the majority? Are there so many in which that's not the point? The initial point is that there is a distinction. There is a distinction. And every time that you find a hadith which is fabricated and made up, there's no doubt you'll find someone from the ulama of hadith who explained and clarified that before Gozair, and before this one, and before that one. That's a long discussion in itself. Also, from the different stories that you'll find about the fabricators of hadith, is how many of the Muslim leaders of the past, the righteous leaders, some of them, they would execute them. They would execute the fabricators, the wadda'in, the kadhabin. And that's because many of those fabricators of hadith, which we didn't mention, were zanadiqa. They weren't even Muslims. They posed to be Muslims. They pretended to be Muslims to destroy Islam from within. Like we mentioned about some of the hadiths that were made up against the Arabs by Persians, or just hadiths that just were made up against about Islam by some of the defeated Zoroastrians in Iraq. When Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu and the Sahaba, and they opened up those lands after the Battle of Qadisiyah, obviously there was a great deal of jahiliyyah, of hatred and racism and nationalism between the pagans, between the Persians and the Arabs. We're Arabs, you're Persians, we're Arabs, etc. We're better than the Arabs. The Arabs are sheep herders, goat herders, camel jockeys. They have no civilization. They're crude, barbarous, quaint people. They don't have no type of culture and civilization. We are the Persians. We fought wars with the Romans, defeated the Romans. We have all types of science, exploration, all types of things we've had for years. Luxury, Silk Road, etc. The list goes on. Culture. These Arabs come out of the desert and they wish to fight us, and then they actually defeated us. And then the concept of the religion, Islam, Tawheed, stomping upon the worship of fire, trampling upon the Zoroastrian creed, which was an ancient creed. Okay? Mesopotamia, Nimrod, and all of these different things like this. The Sumerians, long ancient religion. So, who are they to come and destroy us and to take over our culture and invade our lands, defeat and kill our men, enslave our women and children, and the list goes on. So many of them, they saw that Islam was an unstoppable steamroller. Allah has supported the Muslims. There's no way of stopping them physically. You can't have a frontal attack. So they were upset. They were berated. They were extremely jealous and envious. So they had to fight back. They had to find a way of looking for some type of soft underbelly of the Muslims. And that was through the creed and the politics and the worship and the manners and the etiquette of Islam. And that was by fabricating hadiths, making up hadiths, to push people out of their religion, to get the people not to practice their correct religion. And the list goes on. So many of these people, they weren't even Muslim. So oftentimes, some of the rulers, when they found out about these people, they would capture them. And after they had established that they actually were doing this and they weren't Muslims, they would put them on a stake. They would impale them or hang them. Maybe some of them would burn them alive. And oftentimes, when these fabricators were on the stake or about to be hanged, some of them would say, hey, let me make a last statement. Let me say something. And some of them would say, كيف تقتلونني? How can you kill me? وقد وضعت في دينكم 1000 hadith. And I've made up 1,000 hadiths in your religion. أحلل فيها الحرام وأحرم فيها الحلال. He says, in which I say that the haram is halal and the halal is haram. In other words, you need me to go back and tell you what I made up and what's false. Some of the rulers, some narrations say it was Harun ibn Rashid. He would say, كيفك, always says, كيف بك, He says, what do you think? We don't need you. What do you think about it? He says, Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak. Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak, huh? And this one and that one. He says, يَنْخُلُونَكَ أَوْ يَنْخُلَانِكَ نَخْلًا. He says, Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak and this one and that one, they would, what? Totally mop up all of your mess. We don't need you. We have our scholars of hadith. They know the halal and the haram, and they know the fabricated from the authentic. So execute them, put them to death. There's no need for you to stay alive. And when Abdullah ibn Mubarak rahimahullah also was asked about these fabricated hadiths, what about them? There's so many of them. He says, يَعِيشُ لَهَا الْجَهَابِذَةِ. He says that's the reason why the great scholars and masters of hadith breathe. They breathe for this purpose. That's why they're alive. So the concept of a tahweel, they would try to inflate and exaggerate the number of hadiths that they fabricated as a final twisting of the blade into the Muslims. Like, I'm out, you're killing me, but here, take this. So these are all from the asalib, the different styles of these fabricators of hadith. But like Abdullah Mubarak said, the scholars and the masters of hadith, that's why they lived. That's why Allah made them. Khairan, inshallah, as we said before, that's a very long discussion with regards to the concept of hadith fabrication. Those who made up hadith, justifying it, that's a long story and a long explanation. Bidna ta'ala, we will stop here. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala surely knows best. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.